Hello, it's Stephanie from the Quilter's Planner, and today I'm going to show you an introduction to paper piecing. We are going to be sewing a square and a square quilt block. It is the perfect block to learn how to paper piece with. So visit the quiltersplanner.com website and I will put the link below so you can download this free square and a square foundation paper piecing template, and then you will be ready to go with us. And let me show you what other supplies you need. Of course, you need a rotary cutter and a seam ripper, and you need your fabric, and you can have a little ruler on hand, something that's not too huge. And then this is what I really love. It's called the Add a Quarter ruler. If you don't have it today and you want to still learn this method, that's okay. You can go right ahead and use your other ruler, but it just makes it a little bit more easy. All right, so here's your tools, and now let's go to the first step. When you print out a paper piecing template, you first need to make sure that you've printed at a regular 100% scale. Yeah. This box, if printed out properly, should measure 1 inch square. So you need to grab a ruler, set a nice inch mark for yourself, and double check it. I know it seems like, oh, I don't need to do that, but I have actually had this go wrong for me before, and it will cause your block to not finish at the correct size. So this looks good. We're finishing, our gray box is exactly in 1 inch square, so we know we've printed out everything properly. Now we can move ahead to cut out the template right here. Next, you're gonna use the scissors that you reserve for paper cutting, and you're gonna carefully trim around these outer lines. The outer lines are your outer seams, and they're very important. This square and a square block is set to finish at 4 inches, so with the seam allowance, it's 4.5 inches square. In preparing your fabric, I like to starch my fabric before I sew. That makes it a little bit easier to sew with, and it also makes sure that I'm not starching after, which might cause shrinkage of my final block. What's really interesting is that in many paper piecing templates, patterns that you may buy online, they typically don't give you exact measurements for cutting your fabric. Some patterns do, but a lot don't, and that's okay too. You get really good at eyeballing how much fabric you need. So for this pattern, there's no indication of what size to cut your fabric, but I can give you a little hint if you don't want to mess around with it yourself. I cut my fabric for A1, my center square, to about 3 inches square, and I went ahead and cut 2 more background fabrics in 3 inches square and then cut them on the diagonal to make myself some triangles. You want these triangles and all of the fabric that you're cutting for paper piecing to be oversized from what you actually need. For our A1 fabric, I've selected this pretty pink Allison Glass, and for the background out here, I'm just going to be using a white. I want to start by cutting this about 3 inches square. Seems to fit nicely, so I make sure that I have plenty of room. You can cut something even bigger to start with. That's no problem. In fact, in paper piecing, you want to err on bigger is better. We'll cut it down later. Take your paper piece template and flip it over so you've got the wrong side. Take your center piece of fabric, the very first fabric, our A1 fabric, and we want to put our square over it like this, okay? And so when we flip it over this way, we want the fabric to hang over this black line about 1/4 inch or more. I've turned off my lights in my filming room and used my light board just to demonstrate to you. If you turn your paper piecing over again, you can see that the pink fabric is hanging over this black line, which is what we want it to do because that's going to be our seam allowance. We want it to hang over at least 1/4 inch. So when I told you to cut your square for this block to 3 inches square, that's the minimum. That's like for the least amount of fabric waste. A lot of people in paper piecing go ahead and cut things much bigger, and then they won't have any mistakes. And now I cut my white background fabric, also to 3 inch square, and I'm going to line it up right here like this. You can put a pin in it if you want. This is a small block and I can just hold it, and then we are going to sew on this line. A2 is the first triangle that we're going to do. All right, let's do it. All right, so we've gone over to the machine You can pop some glue here or a pin, holding your pieces together. Look, they're not overlapping perfectly, and that's okay. I just want to make sure I've got enough hanging over this black line in this direction that it's going to give me a good seam allowance that's at least 1/4 inch. Decrease your stitch length to about 1.75. It makes it much easier for you to tear the paper off later. We come back to our cutting mat and you put your fabrics on the bottom, your lines on the top. You fold the piece of paper back right on your seam line. And this is where that add 1/4 ruler comes in handy. It has a ledge right here that bumps up against your seam and it holds it into place. And now look, see how crooked how I held that fabric up and sewed it? And it doesn't matter. As long as you have enough fabric, you trim and you have a perfect 1/4 inch. That's what this groove is, a 1/4 inch groove. Hanging over. Now what? Now we are going to fold our fabric over like that, finger press it over, and if you'd like you can take it back over to your pressing station and give it a very quick, gentle press, which I find very satisfying. So there we go, we've pressed. Now we're going to do A3. We do it in order and we add another triangle. A3, I flip the fabric over. A3 is right here. I line it up there and I pop it on my light board or up to a window just to make sure that I have enough hanging over, at least 1/4 inch hanging over, and then I take this to the sewing machine and sew on the black line with the fabric down. Back at the sewing machine, fabric's here, sewing on the line. Here's what it looks like on the back so far, which is really the front. And now we're going to fold this back. And if you don't have an add 1/4 ruler, just grab a regular ruler, line up your seam just along that 1/4 inch line of your ruler, trim it off. Now we have a nice 1/4 inch seam allowance for both fabrics. Fold your paper back and let's press this open. Just like that. And we have 2 more corners to do, A4 and A5, in exactly the same way. So I take one more triangle, check that it's hanging over. This becomes really innate after you've done it a few times. Here's what it looks like on this side. Flip it over, fold it back, add 1/4 ruler or regular ruler. Close your blade. Look how neat and tidy that is. Now we flip it over again. Finger press that back or press it with an iron. And then we have one more side to do. Grab your triangle, line it up, flip it over, check your seam, hold it up to the light, make sure it's hanging over, sew on the line. I start a couple of stitches in front of the line and finish a couple of stitches past the line. And sometimes when you go to fold back your paper here, again, you're going to have to just gently kind of tear there in order to trim, but that's okay. Like that. That's okay. Now let's go trim again, like this. And then comes the most exciting part. Trimming it off, my favorite part. Get rid of all of those tiny scraps. All right, now we go like this, and give it a quick press with our iron. Now, it looks funky, right? Doesn't look very clean and neat and precise. it's time to trim all the way around the outside for our perfect block. Okay, here's my favorite part. Let's trim it up. We're going to trim to the edge of the paper, squaring up our block essentially. I'm just going to use a regular ruler for this one. My trusty Olfa blade that cuts like butter because it's a new blade in there. Love it. As a side note, I have been making videos before. I have forgotten to close my blade, and this is very dangerous. You can cut yourself badly if you forget to close this every time. So work on making it a habit. For a while I was in the habit and then I got out of the habit. Very dangerous. Take time. Make sure your blade is closed. Okay. Now we have a perfect, beautiful square and a square block, and it's time to tear the paper off. There are special kinds of foundation piecing paper you can buy on the market. I just use, for the most part, computer paper because with a tiny stitch length, I don't seem to have much of a problem. Again, I'm going to kind of pull it back and tear it out, just like you're tearing out a check from your checkbook. Do you remember checks? I don't have many of those nowadays. I only write a few of those every couple of months. Everything is digital now, right? But you remember, tear out the check. Sometimes you have these tiny little pieces, no sweat. Just gently pull them away. Like that. And then you're stuck with this centerpiece, which should kind of lift right off for you. It's so satisfying. If your stitch length is small enough, you really shouldn't be stuck with a lot of paper under the seams. And there's my beautiful square and a square block. I want to show you some blocks that I'm working on that are similar to a square and a square. They're actually called Tell Me a Story blocks, and the pattern is by Amy Friend, and it's in her book Intentional Paper Piecing, and it's just really fun, and I really love the look at them. And you can see that the center block I've fussy cut, which is really fun. So I chose a little bit of the fabric that fit in that block. Sometimes it fits better than others, but I think the overall look is still adorable. And I'm making this quilt for my girls, and they're little bits that I thought meant something to our family that were really cute. I've been collecting fabric that makes me happy when I look at it. So I wanted you to see that the square and a square block is great for fussy cut centers, even if this is a little different version that you can work your way up to.